Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome. You won't be able to see me today because I want to be teaching from the board, and unfortunately, the screen's not wide enough for both of us. So I figured the board was more important. How are you doing today? Tonight, whatever time it is, I hope you're making it great. Why don't we pray the Druid's Creed and begin? I promise the kindred, the folk, and Druidhood myself to be so strong that nothing can disturb my peace of mind and development of body. To talk health, happiness, and prosperity to every person I meet. To make all my friends feel there is something worthwhile in them. To look at the sunny side of everything and make my optimism come true. To ponder only the best. To work only for the best. And to expect only the best. To stand just as enthusiastic about the success of others as I am about my own. To forget the mistakes of the past and press on to greater achievements of the future. To wear a cheerful countenance at all times. And give every living creature I meet a smile. To give so much time to improving myself that I have no time to criticize others. To exist too large for worry, too noble for anger, too strong for fear, and too happy to permit the presence of trouble. To think well of myself and to proclaim this fact to the world, not only in loud word, but also in great deed. To live in the faith that the whole world is on my side so long that I am true to the best that is in me. To honor my procrastination, not as an excuse for due time, but as waiting on the right time to execute action from virtue. To know that my heart, soul, mind, and spirit are in sync with the kindred only when I am genuine with their comprehensive truth. To abide unmovable in my ethics of worshiping God, doing all good, and remaining brave against those who oppose me, and steadfast with those who support me. To grasp excellence as mastering a concept, not by knowing few ideas of many subjects, but by comprehending and practicing many ideas, creating the sum of that subject. Gitawen. I hope you're all doing well tonight. Welcome, invite people, and don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. I know I'm coming on a little bit early tonight, but sometimes you have to go where the wind blows. So, welcome everyone. As you can see there tonight, we're going to be talking about Serene Sunday, Into the Labyrinth. Where are you on the path? And I also pinned a comment up there, so you could read that. If you're interested, and that's something you're interested in, then go for it. But if this isn't something you're interested in, then maybe you might want to share it with somebody who may find value in the information presented tonight. Let's start. First thing we're going to talk about is part 1, which is etymology. We're going to talk about the etymology of the word labyrinth. Then we're going to talk about, in part 2, history. History of the existence of the word. And not only the existence of the word, but, how it came to be from an historical sense, not necessarily from a linguistic sense. Part 3, we're going to talk about types, purpose, and function of the labyrinth. Number 4, we're going to talk about the parts of our labyrinth. Number 5, sorry about that. We're going to talk about drawing our own labyrinth. And number 6, part 6, we're going to talk about placement, that is where we are in our own labyrinth, and then make conclusions with the Faridal and the Dreot. So I hope that you are going to have an awesome time tonight. You're going to learn so much, and I can't wait for you guys to bring something back from this Serene Sunday. Let's start. Whoops, sorry about that. Alrighty, here we go. So etymology. So in part 1, we're going to talk a little bit about etymology of the word labyrinth, where it could have begun and where it went, and how it became what it is today. So we're going to follow a little flow chart that I made for you, and I hope you enjoy it. Alright? The first thing is oh, and by the way, if you want not to see the comments, just slide your finger or whatever, slide it over, and then you won't be able to see the comments, but you will be able to see the full screen. I don't think you would have that problem on YouTube, though. Alright. The first thing is labyrinth. So, we don't really know where the word came from. We have ideas, and we're going to talk about that in a note that I wrote. But I don't really have any certain known origin to the word. So, it was used as a way to describe a structure used to hold the Minotaur, okay, near Knossos in Crete. Alright, once that happened, as we move down on the flowchart, okay, it was a maze or building with intricate passages. Alright, next, as it evolved, labyrinth becomes Labyrinthos, which is Greek, okay? And then it shifts over to Labyrinthus in Latin. And that actually became a common word to use, not just for a structure, but to define bewildering arguments, as you can see there in that section. Let me just, there we go. Alright. And then, at that point, it then moves into Labyrinthus, or structure with corridors and turns. So, obviously, the Greeks had it first, then the Roman Empire got it. Alright, and I guess they learned from the Greeks and it went from that point forward. But there are way earlier dates of these labyrinths, and we're going to talk about all that. And finally, we come out in 1400 AD with Labyrinth, which is basically the original word we talked about, which is what? Labyrinth. Now, I want to make some side notes, too. And that is the first. Sorry about that. I don't know if I could bring you over. Hold on just a second, guys. Oh, here we go. Good. I got it. There we go. So, basically, the note that I want to talk to you guys about is it may be connected to a pre-Greek language, okay, Lydian, then Beaks. One would be Labris, which is a double-edged axe, and Lara, which is a narrow canal. Now, the problem with linguistics is very simple, and that is that it throws you on a labyrinth as soon as you begin talking about labyrinths. And so you end up, when you start talking about etymology and you don't really know where to go, I don't necessarily believe that either Beaks or Lydian was correct. I think that both of them had worth. Because, as you will see eventually, that both of these are very clear in a very old structure in Gaul or France, which dates back at least the structures, as it would be, at least to, I would say, 4500 BC. So I want you guys to know that, because I think that that's really important. So we're going to talk about this, and I want you to remember very specifically the double-edged axe and the narrow canal. Know that. All right? All right, let's pull you guys back a little bit, and let's come back and we'll continue. All right. So, after we talk about etymology, I want to ask you guys a question, because I think the question is really, really, really important. And that is this. Let me just back it out a little bit. Oops, sorry, wrong way. There we go. Could a labyrinth be that which speaks to our ear canal, so that we may use our dorse, that's our twisting mechanism, okay, from energy, which is the double-edged axe, to know how to turn on the path? And I find that interesting with Lydian and Beeks. Both of them talk about this very point. And so what ends up happening is you end up with this incredible idea that says, how possible is it that the labyrinth is something that actually speaks to our ear? Because remember that the Druids did not write or commit to writing. The Druids actually spoke. And so I find it worthwhile to investigate this question and to think about it, because as we think about it, I think that we could use both Beeks and Lydian to identify this idea that we are both using the ear canal and the double-edged axe or dorse to know how to turn and how to move forward. So there's always a blockage, right? And that blockage is this. So the blockage is that sometimes we see God as, and when we see God as blank, we forget and fail to realize that the gods are actually more than that. But specifically speaking about energy, which I'll get to, we could either block their noise out, or we could listen to the value of the spoken word. I find it interesting that when we start talking about energy, we have actually four references that I want to talk to you about, and this is fairly important. That energy itself is source, force, course, and dorse. And when we see that, we understand that source sometimes may be reflected in the god or gods of your understanding. When we hear force, we see that that's the power, right? Course would be the path, and dorse is us, our movement, our being. If we understand that source is the author and force is the voice, then we need a canal and an axe, or a fin, interestingly enough, which a double-edged axe looks like. It actually is able to twist and turn, so this way we are able to guide ourselves and navigate ourselves on the path. What I want to talk to you also about tonight is this idea of maybe that the source is omnipotence. Force would be creation. Course would be their will. And dorse would be our free will. Alright. Let's bring it back out a little bit, and we'll move forward. Have your questions ready? Part 2. History with a focus on Celticism. History with a focus on Celticism. You know, there are many origins of labyrinths, and I have some here, and I'm going to just zoom in on them so we can see them. Okay, we have Cretan origins and Egyptian origins. We have Lemnian origins from Pliny, who also talks about the Italic origins. We have Native American, Russian, Indian, and the list just goes on and on as far as the origins of labyrinths, right? But there is a connection with these origins, okay? There's a connection with these origins, and we're going to talk about that. So, the connection with the origins, let me just try to turn you guys up a little bit. Hold on a second. There we go. Nicer. Okay, so the connections with the origins is that I found that with Celticism, we talk about Cretan, Galician, and I call it Chart, or Chartre, Italic, Germanic, India, Jericho, Atlantean, that these are all connections, not necessarily origins. Possible origins? Maybe. We haven't discovered anything earlier except one thing, and that is a key word that I want you to know right now, and that is this word right here. It is Gavrinis. Gavrinis. Gavrinis is from France. And when you learn a little bit about Gavrinis, you find that it's actually a mound. And inside the mound, there are these incredible megalith structures that I would say are so powerful that we really don't know what they are, but they do have this sort of labyrinth-like, I guess, way about them. And when you look it up online, you could look up videos and you could see a lot of things that you'll find really interesting. And I think that that is what really starts out in around, you know, some say 3,500, some say 4,500. Some say that the mound that these stones are in is actually later, and that the stones themselves are even much older than that. But you may want to think about this as the possible original origin of the labyrinth. One other thing that I want to say is that as we move into the pre-Celtic here, okay, let me use my magic wand here, it's a toothpick. The pre-Celtic here from the Gavrinis, we have here that I believe that there is a possibility that the Celts, or the Celtae, definitely took information from this. Alright? Either the Celtae or the priests of the Celtae, which would have been the Druids, and then have moved from there. And then we bring it to Ireland, which is Celtic, and I believe that the labyrinths there were circular. If we look at most labyrinths, we will find circular motions, circular movements, circular directions. It doesn't mean that there aren't other types of patterns. It just simply means that I believe that the most famous and most popular, and I would say most prominent, would be the Celtic circular labyrinth. The other observation that I learned is this. I'm going to just zoom in for just a second. Hold on just a second, and there we go. Alright, here we are. with patterns, there's 4. I only list 3 here. There's basically 4 patterns of a labyrinth. The first is a circle. Sorry. The second is a square. And the third is an octagon. Alright, so there are your 3 patterns right there. Now there is another. I'm not going to go into that just yet, because that actually isn't a pattern. It is a pattern, but it's sort of sporadic. It's sort of all over the place. Which brings me to talk about some observations I made with these patterns and also the etymology of the words. So let's circle us back here and let's look at these observations. There we go. Alright. So the first, there we go. This way you guys aren't crooked. Alright. There we go. So the first thing I'm going to talk to you guys about is that you have here maze and maze. Now, while there is correlation and there is hypothetical evidence, but there is no sound evidence. But I would say that maze is a coarse it's a very coarse and rough and rugged road, if you will, or a map. And that could tie into why a maze is the way it is. Could tie into the idea that those original circles that we found in Gavrinis look identical to corn. I found that incredibly powerful observation. The second observation I like to make is the neurological one. And then I find that in one article, where none of those patterns I talked about is, I find that in this pattern of a labyrinth, you find these lines with points, and they almost look like, I would say, if you will, neuropathways. You know, neurotransmitters, if you will. And those neurotransmitters mean that, or could only mean, that there had to be some sort of energy in these structures. Now, whether or not the structures themselves were maps or batteries or whatever the case is, or something else, I would say this, that there's definitely a link between the neurology, the mind, and then these labyrinths. How are we doing so far? Next is technology. And when I'm looking at some of these, when I'm looking at some of these, oops, wrong way here. There we go. When I'm looking at some of these labyrinths, I can't help to notice that they look like motherboards in, say, a hard drive. They almost remind me of motherboards, and so that is electricity. So in all cases, whether or not we're dealing with the maze, whether or not we're dealing with the neurology or the neuropathways or neurotransmitters, or whether or not we're dealing with some sort of technological base or pattern or layout of something that might remind us of a motherboard, then I find it very worthwhile to think about the labyrinth in a much deeper way. Sorry about this, guys. Yeah, I wished I had a whole room where I could teach you guys, but just not yet. Alright, part 3. Types, purposes, and functions. So the types would depend on the region, right? You have circular, you have rectangular or square, you have octagon, and you have the sporadic. But I think that those labyrinths are trying to communicate something to us. And while they depend on the region or the area, whether it be from, what we now call America or the Americas, to anywhere in Europe or any of the continental regions, I believe that these types are definitely communicating something. In some way, shape, or form, I think the circular ones, and I have reason to believe that the circular ones are communicating a thinking and contemplation process. The square rectangular ones are communicating a mapping or a navigation process. The octagon are communicating an allowing or consideration process. And I also believe that the sporadic ones, the ones that I told you about, that look like almost those neurotransmitters firing off, are communicating more of a challenging and an investigational an investigation process, or challenging an investigation process. So why do I think that? Because I believe that the function of these labyrinths aren't necessarily important, and while they have a definite function, in many cases decoration, landscape, landmarking, etc., especially for today, and they might have even had that a long time ago, but I don't necessarily know if I believe that. That would be their function today, and these are some examples. But I wrote down a definition of what I believe would be the purpose of them. Okay? And let's enlarge this so we can see what I believe the purpose is. I write that the purpose of these labyrinths is to encourage listening to ourselves and our gods, or pantheons, moving deeper and deeper into our own heart, soul, mind, and spirit, to be one with everything. I guess the occult question would be, could these be images of the neurotransmitters of higher minds, or even a code to unlock energy of quantum power? Because if they are, then all we have to do is apply a few rules, some equations, and I have a simple one ready to go for you guys. But I think that could be something I like to talk about. Now, one of the things that I, like to mention about Karen in Gaul that we talked about earlier is a passage from the book The Druid Code from Thomas Sheridan, entitled The Druid Code, Magic, Megaliths, and Mythology. And he writes on page 195, he writes, "In order to understand how, and more importantly why, the megalith builders created these remarkable structures, we have to somehow attempt to get inside their heads and try to understand how their consciousness expressed itself cognitively. Trying to do this with post-enlightenment scientific mind is akin to putting a square peg in a round hole. It's not going to happen. They solidified their own existence in stone, and later their descendants did the same in story. Between both, we have a bilateral conduit back into the complexity of their world from the vantage point of a complexity of our own." Yeats expressed this beautifully in his poem, Fergus and the Druid. He writes, This whole day I followed in the rocks, and you have changed and flowed from shape to shape. First as a raven on whose ancient wings scarcely a feather lingered. Beautifully written by Thomas Sheridan. Now that we know that, let's move up and we'll go to part 4. Now we're going to start getting a little bit closer to a personal level. But before we do that, we need to look at some things and identify some parts of our labyrinth, as in part 4. I write that it's important now to work on drawing our own labyrinth. And here are some suggestions and ideas. Okay? Here we go. These are only suggestions and ideas, and I call these parts or P. The line, the loop, as you can see, it goes around and under. The angle, the intersection, the wide turn, the fork or the yield, the sharp turn, the dead end, and then I have an entrance and exit point. And I want to show this to you. I have this, and this line looks exactly like this, but in this line here, you have 3 dots to show that it's an open way for possible transmigration. And finally, the closure loop, which is at the very end. I call them P, or parts, and underneath I have question marks. What I want you to do at this point is pause the video. If you're watching live, you could continue. And what I want you to think about is, what is the line telling you? What is the loop under or loop over telling you? What is the angle telling you? What is the intersection telling you? The wide turn, what is that saying? What is the fork or the yield, depending on where you're coming from or what angle you're going in? What does that say? What's a sharp turn say to you? What's a dead end, or a ridiculous word that I don't even know why it's in the language, cul-de-sac? You know, what's the where on this labyrinth are you going to place your entrance and exit? And what's a loop signify? You know, is it a closure? So you're going to fill in those so that this way you know that you're going to fill in on your own what these things actually mean to you. Next, you're going to need 2 things. Okay? You're going to need a square piece of paper, and there's a reason for that square. You'll also need a flashlight, a flame, light bulb, because what we're going to do is we're going to superimpose the square piece of paper with another piece of paper, and that's the reason for the 2 pieces, or the 2 square pieces of paper. Next, I want you to use a pencil. Make sure you bless the pencil before you use it. Make sure it has an eraser on it. And finally, last but not least, the square. Let's zoom in on this. The square, hold on guys. Alright, there we go. The square is actually 9 quadrants. I use the word quadrant indicated by the letter Q, just as I used earlier with the word parts, signified by the letter P. Remember these letters. As you can see there, you don't have to use these words, but if you will, use words that mean something to you. For example, in the upper left-hand corner, I have hopeful. You're going to write in there what you would put in a word that means hopeful to you. In the upper center quadrant, possible. Anything that means possible to you. In the upper right, desire, or any word that means desire to you. In the middle left, practical, and again your own word. The center, balance, and the right, aloof, right there in the center of everything. Finally, the bottom left, despair, or any word that means despair. Impossible, or any word that means impossible. And finally, in the lower right, regret, or any word that means regret. You write those down, or you can pause and play it back at a later time. Next, let's shift over to this side here. All right. Because the depth of where these lines are, especially if you're making these loops here in this labyrinth, the depth, depending if you're here or under, means something. Especially the one we're going to be drawing today. Depth is actually the lower ground of the depth would be that you're reaching toward truth. You're reaching toward that world that Plato calls the really real world. The higher you come, for example, if you're, say, let me just show you something here. The higher you are, so if you're on the bridge, the higher you are, okay, means that you're closer to this reality, the real world, or as many would call the Matrix. Got it? All right. So now that we got that, we completed part 4, and now we're on the part 5, where I drew a sample labyrinth for you, which looks nothing like the regular labyrinths, but this is more deepening. As you can see what I did here, I drew a labyrinth for you, which goes all the way down and out. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to get this whole thing. Let me see if I can get this. I might be able to get most of it here. There we go. So that's the labyrinth I drew for you. And I'm going to show you with my finger a little thing. Here I put my exit up here. I put my entrance down here. Alright? As you can see, this is just a regular line. And here we have an intersection. These are all the parts I told you about. We got a fork coming up here. We got an angle, an angle here actually, and one of those dead ends right here. As you can see, here's a loop. You see how it's just going lower and lower, right? And this is just exploratory. I had to put all of these together, and I'm like, how am I going to do this? You don't have to use all of them. This is a wide turn, right? And this is more of a sharp turn right here. Okay? So you got a wide turn and a sharp turn. And all these things are going to mean what they mean to you. Don't necessarily take dead end as something negative, because dead end might mean that you might need to leave a situation. So remember, this is on a square piece of paper. Okay? Square piece of paper, and you want to make sure, I mean, you could cover all the quadrants, but if you did cover these quadrants, which are the 9, right, that we just drew, I have nothing in this section. There could be a reason for that. I have a lot going on in the upper right. There could be a reason for that too. So you're going to have fun with this. You're going to explore with this. You're going to challenge yourself. But whatever you do, you want to make sure that your lines are continuous. That this is going underneath of this and coming out the other end. That all of these things are going deeper and deeper, deeper and deeper. And I would use the Holy Serpent, or as I like to call my Holy Serpent, Anahad Nofa. And so that is basically the Labyrinth in part 5. And that's how you're going to do it. Now, it doesn't have to look like this. I mean, I did this in a few seconds. I mean, I just wanted to make sure that I had all the parts that I told you about. And you might even come up with more parts. There's many more types of intersections and crossroads. You know, just pick up a driver's manual and for your license, and you'll see a whole bunch of things that you could do, including the yield and the fork, which is actually here. But it depends on which way you're coming from, because direction is very important. Which way are you going? Are you going this way, or are you going this way? You know, because even if you're coming in at the entrance down here, you may get twisted again and end up back in one of these other sorts of, other sorts of things. Look at this loop. Here's your loop. I did point a loop out here, but here's another loop. Look at this. It just comes and circles around. Now there's no closure, but still, it is a very interesting type of, if you will, not a cul-de-sac, but it's giving you, I don't know, I'm getting the idea that it's giving you time to think about something here. Alright, let's move forward to part 6. Placing and conclusion. Well, your placement, alright, your placement, let's do this here. Sorry, guys. Alrighty. Placing and conclusion. Your placement is signified by an X. Remember that I told you about the parts, right? Line, loop, fork, yield, intersection. Those would be the parts. Remember I told you about those quadrants we learned about, right? The 9 in the square, they're your quadrants. I identified that with Q. And D for depth. So your placement is your parts, which is the direction. The distance, or the quadrant, which is the distance, divided by the depth. And that's how you will find. So when you add the parts up with the quadrants, you add those two together, figure out what it means to you. Then once you got that meaning, find out your depth. Find out your depth. Okay? And that's how you're going to figure out where you are on your own path. I believe now it's time for the Foriedel or Eadel or the Fuin, which means a Druidic mantra. I never use the last. I never use Fuin. I always use Foriedel, which is the first. And I write here this as your Druidic mantra tonight. Because I know myself, I know my gods, I know what to listen to, I know where I am going. Because I know myself, I know my gods, I know what to listen to, I know where I'm going. And remember that your Foriedel will always have 4 parts. 1 identifying your heart, 1 identifying your soul, 1 identifying your mind, and 1 identifying your spirit. Because just to say, I am rich, I am rich, I am rich, is just about as valuable as saying, I'm depressed, I'm depressed, I'm depressed. It does nothing. It keeps you from without. Finally, I'd like to talk about the Dreok tonight. Remember that you have two pieces of paper, squares, and the Dreok is actually going to be drawing a dot onto one of the squares, and then once you do it, you're going to cast it. You're going to just throw it. You're going to just throw it out. Then you're going to take your map and you're going to put it on top of this, covering the dot. Then, remember I told you earlier, you're going to need that light bulb, or that light, or that flashlight, or that candle flame. You're going to superimpose them, and you're going to find out where you are on your path. So you say, well, Druid in a class, or Druid Klaus. I do like Klaus, by the way. I'm getting comfortable with Klaus. You say, Druid Klaus, what if the dot doesn't touch the path? Well, make an additional path to include the dot. It's that simple. That's why you're using pencil. Use an additional path to make to bring the dot and incorporate the dot into the labyrinth. Because you certainly don't want to be off the path. I don't know necessarily whether or not I believe that you are ever off the path. I think that we are always on the path. I think that it is also understandable that we, as people, know that others are on their own paths as well. Something to think about when we think about this idea of, again, the Forir, which is because I know myself, I know my gods, I know what to listen to, I know where I am going. And I feel that that is genuinely spectacular. I had a fun time tonight, and I'm going to slide over now and see if I could read some comments and answer some questions. If this is a YouTube, until I get 1,000 people on, we will never be able to do live YouTubes. So I really implore you, please, I do this for free. I beg of thee to really, if you can, if everybody can, just get 10 people to like the YouTube channel. Same name, all you got to do, and same logo, same everything, and you'll see my very smiley, handsome face on there. And let's go ahead and see what questions we got. Here we go. Alrighty. Looks like Elena's having a good time. Michelle, Cheryl, Erwin, Embro, bienvenido. Shaw Webb. And that's about it. That's all I have. I only have 4. Thank you very much for watching. And I really do hope that tonight's show really helped you understand the idea and the benefit of, really drawing your own labyrinth. Because, like I said, you could use the labyrinths that have been written, but until we actually know what those labyrinths are, well, until we know what those labyrinths are and what they mean, we use our own. And it does connect us in a way to the pantheon or pantheons of your understanding. Well, I don't know about you, but I really did have a wonderful time tonight. I think that, at least I hope that you guys had a good time. There we go. I think you did. And I also want to say thank you so much for watching. I know I said I was going to start at 8, but I had some other things planned, so hopefully if you catch this on a watch party, you'll totally enjoy it and totally understand that going into the labyrinth, we are all on the path. Girawan. Petshigabra. Arnit. East. Le. Mo. Gui. Ta, she, fear. Ta, she, fear. I come to you not as a wizard of wizards, not as a Merlin of Merlins or a guru of gurus, not as some high arch druid of druids. No. I simply come to you as Druid Nicholas the Clone, and my self, my being, my purpose is to make known what is occult and to help you with your own magic. Whatever time of day it is, make it great. And you may also want to watch Water is West. You can just plug that into the videos, Water is West, and they'll come right up, okay? That'll help you out with your lines and your homework. But this also will help clear out your head as well. Enjoy, everyone.